Okay, we are back. This is part 2 of our watercolor painting of a barn scene in the snow. And we're hopefully about halfway finished. At least that's what I think we are. So we left it off with the way you see it here. We've got some interesting shapes going on. You can definitely see the two buildings here. And so I was in the process of putting on the eaves on the right side over here with some dark color. I had made up a very dark mixture, almost a black mixture for these eaves. Made it of alizarin crimson, cupric green, and a little ultramarine blue. And so we had that going, and we had had some nice browns. I'm resetting some things in my palette here that I cleaned the palette off to get some of the muck out of there and to clean it up a little bit. So I'm just resetting a few of these colors in here now that we had before. A few yellows. I had some yellow ochre that we're going to start putting in the foreground around the snow. And I had some grays and lavenders over here. All right, get me some of this nice ultra violet. Okay. And I had a little bit of that mixed in there. All right, I think I've got my key colors that I need all set. I'm using the 1/2-inch flat so far again. And I'll use it as long as I can until I run out of places where I can use it. And then I'll change either to a larger or a smaller brush. I'm going to come in here and put in a couple of dark areas that need, for like the windows. These windows, this area back here needs to be retouched. Make it just a little darker. Back there, get some. Want that to show up fairly well. Okay, that's enough of that. Soften the bottom so it doesn't look like I glued that on. And these areas over here with this window, I want it just a little darker, not too much. Something like this. So you can kind of see there is a window in there. It doesn't have to be too explicit. It's not really the center of interest. I want the center of interest to be in this area here. So anything over here where I don't want your eye to go, I don't want to make it too distinct, too explicit. But I want you to be able to, when you look at it, I want you to be able to tell there's some windows in there and that sort of thing. So it's probably good enough for that. This eave in the back over here that I didn't finish before we took our break. See if I can. Too much green in it, I think. More of my ultra blue. Put it on, test it, see what it looks like. Something like that. Dry the brush. And sort of blend it. Use a dry brush on that. You see how it sort of makes a really nice looking eave. This is almost too sharp. I'm going to have to wet it slightly and soften it a little bit. That's pretty good. I'll leave it like that. I have another window back there that I want people to see, but I don't want them to spend a lot of time looking at it, so I'm going to put in something like this. Put it in, soften up, take the brush, take some of the paint out, even take the paper towel and blot it a little bit so it doesn't stand out so much. Okay, so that is those windows. This area around this window here is standing out a little bit too much, so we just kind of tone it down, put a little wash over it. I'll come back and put that window back in there. It's too bright. Okay. All right, so the center of interest is here. When you look at this painting, hopefully your eye is going to go in this area. You're going to look around, bounce around here, up in the, I'm going to have this bale of hay hanging out here. Come around this way, connect it. I'm going to have some trees right here. Then the snow is going to be this way. So I'm hoping to be able to move the viewer's eye around the painting that way. That's what so much of art is about, is trying to move the viewer's eye to stay in the painting, but move around. So we have areas where we're going to have some grasses and sort of ochre grasses. It may still be left over from snow. They've got different colors in them here. I don't like that. Pretty thick. See here, I'm just sort of scumbling now some things that look like might be yellow grasses. Soften it up, get some water at the bottom, soften that edge. Put some more over here, run it up into this area even. So we're adding warmth to this painting by putting this stuff in. So soften it up again at the bottom. Want some soft edges and some hard edges in some places. Over here is a little bit too hard edge, I think. And I want to carry that with start changing, put some shadows in over here as we move to this side. And lavender, lavender. Some of this will be shadows, I guess, from the barn, maybe. But again, it's pretty nondescript stuff here. I don't want it to be all beautiful, interesting things that take your eye over here. I just want it to kind of have a lead in. I'm going to have some more snow running here. I'm going to put some blues in. These areas here are interesting, but a little too bright maybe. But again, it's going to help pull your eye. Any kind of red or bright orange in a painting will pull your eye into the area like this. Try a little more ochre over here and see what happens. Big bush right there. Give me some of this nice lavender color. Put it in, start showing some shadows here, maybe some shadows there. And all of it needs to be blended together fairly soft. Not too hard of an edge right there, so let's soften it like that. How's that? Okay. Maybe let's go back and got a very sharp edge at the bottom of this building here, which I don't like. I'm going to have to put some interesting stuff in there if I can. as I make this darker in front, I'm actually making another layer of the painting. Scumbling, wet on dry. Nice purples in there, lavenders. Okay. Interesting edge. Make it so there it's a nice abstract shape if you can. And from a distance, it looks like you have some bushes that are there. All of this in the front now, we're going to start. See, you know what, maybe I should let that dry off a little bit and put in some trees in the back. I've got this still to grain brown and some reddish colors I'm going to try to put in here. These trees. A little too light, make it a little darker. On this side of the tree anyway. If I do that and then take some water, clear water, and pull it this way, I end up getting something that looks very rounded, which is what you try to do when you make these tree trunks. A little bit too green in there, get me some more brown. And some water. Okay, something like that. Another tree over here to the right of it. Change the color slightly and pull up something similar this way. Pull it on the left side. I've got a V here, and wet the brush, come back and blend it slightly with clear water. Some spots of white I want to get out of there. Okay, so that's a good start for those. I think I'll put another branch over here. A couple of branches. Like that. Again, get the brush slightly damp and put some clear water on it. Ooh, got some red on that brush I don't want. Get that off of there. And when that dries, I'm going to come back, I'll put in a few more light branches. I'm going to put some nice blurred edge or diffused edge trees in this area around there. In a few minutes, I'll dampen that. When that dries, I'll dampen this area and come back with my big brush and put in some trees. I've got a couple of things sticking up here that are known as lightning rods. So I can do this. They usually have some sort of base on them of some sort that holds them in place. Okay, that's good enough. A little more brown on this guy up here to strengthen him. Okay. All right. Base trees are in. Do I need a shadow? I need a shadow on this paper towel here. I need a shadow on this small building that faces the sun. Like right in here, I need a shadow. That's about it right there. So that shadow works. There may be a little more shadow here that I could actually put in. If I can make it a little bit darker than what's there. Okay, that helps highlight that a little bit. Vertical streaks in here to make it look like we got boards and stuff running. Something like that. How about this window now? Maybe I can touch in a bit darker. I think it's dry. No, it's not dry enough. The way to tell is if you put your finger on it, and if it's cold, it's still too wet. If it's room temperature or the same temperature as your finger, it should be dry. But if it's cool to the touch, it's too wet. All right, what are we going to work on here? Let's see. Mountain back here looks pretty good. I'm going to put just a slight light wash over some of this barn area. I think it's too bright. So we'll see how this works. Yeah. Just enough to darken it down a little bit. On this side, same thing. Just enough to make it a little darker. Because the darker I make this, the more the bright yellow is going to stand out when I put in this hay bale that's sticking out of the door up here. Got a lot of white up here. Take some of that out. The brush sometimes splits hairs. Okay, that's starting to look a little better to me. Wonder how this is up here. Is it? That's fairly dry. Maybe I can put in those trees now. I'll go back and get my big old number 1-inch brush. And first I'm going to do is take some clear water. And very lightly, I'm going to just wet some of this around this tree here. I don't want it to dissolve the paint that's on there that I just put on for those trunks, but I do want it to be slightly damp because I'm going to come in now with a brush load of some steel grain brown, I think. Might have a little of this yellow ochre in it. Just see how this works here. Something like that. Over here on the other side, I want something that's got a little more color change in it. So get these beautiful, soft, diffused edges with watercolors that are very difficult to get with other mediums. And I can always come back and darken that up a little bit if I need to, but right now I don't think I need to do too much. Just a little lavender over here and see if that helps. May help give me some shadows in there and bring out a little too much. Wipe that out of the brush. Back and hit a little. So with that paper being just slightly damp, you can actually get some very neat effects, and all I'm using is this great big old 1-inch brush. Okay. Just have to know when to stop is the problem. I'll leave that for now. Areas in the foreground. This area here, there's a lot of snow. There's actually a little bit of a frozen pond here I see on the original photo I'm working off of. And I want to give it some, usually ice or water in the snow scene is usually very dark. It's a lot darker than you would think. It's actually sometimes almost black. But let's see if we can put in, take my 1-inch brush again. I'm going to come in here and put in some clear water. Fairly clear water, I guess. It's got a little bit of a tint to it, but for the most part it's clear. So in this foreground, I'm going to try to wet this whole thing down as much as possible. Since I'm at the bottom of the painting, if I get some running, it's not going to be terrible. It's not going to go, I'm going to cover something in the foreground that I don't want to have paint on. So let's get this thing fairly wet. Paper expands. If you notice how loose this paper is, now I'm putting water on it. When you put water on watercolor paper, it expands. So that's why I use these clips on the end down here to sort of, you can always grab it and pull it back a little tighter like this, and keep it from being too loose. Okay, I think that's pretty good and wet. Now I'm going to start coming in with some of my lavenders and some of my blues and lavenders. On this side, we're going to have a lot of, there's going to be some so this is snow, but it's got some interesting soft, very soft effects to it. And because that paper's wet, that's the way it's going to dry, and that's the way it's going to look. And I'll come back and highlight some of the darker areas. I'm going to put on some grasses and that sort of thing in here. But I'm just using a lavender, almost pure ultraviolet. Over here we got the same kind of thing going on. Paper dries out fairly quickly. Come in and put some water on the brush and make it softer if you end up with too hard of an edge. All of this should be fairly soft edge here. So you see an area that's a lot lighter, a little darker in the foreground. We have some light streaks, put in some more bushes. The snow is really going to be sort of in this area. The rest of it's going to be covered up. But we're going to have shadows here, some spots of white in some places. And then right in here, I'm going to have some very dark. When that dries, I'm going to darken that up and sort of show you the outline of the water there. The frozen water, whatever it is. Soften this up, soften, soften, soften. So clear water does wonders, even if the paper does start to dry too much. Okay, that'll work for now, for a while. Let's see if we can start putting in some of this bale of hay up here that's sticking out of the barn door. And I'm using ochre and some primary yellow, cad yellow. And I don't want this to be, I have to gray it down just a little. So if I make it too bright, it's going to be way too bright. But let's see here. So I'm just using the corner of this 1-inch brush. I haven't used a round brush for this painting yet. So far it's all just 1-inch flat, 1/2 inch flat. So there's an interesting little shape there that looks like it could be hay hanging out of the barn. Put some shadows under there by adding a little bit of either blue or purple. If you add blue, it'll turn pretty green. If you add some purple to this, you'll start getting a grayish or olive color that actually looks like you've got some texture there that you can work with. So it's not too bad there. Let me let that set for a while and marinate. And over here, I think we're going to have some of the similar colors on top of the snow. Show some shadows. The top of snow can either be soft edge or it can be rough edge. Okay. Let's see here. Okay, I got my trees pretty well done. I need to put a few highlights in there. How about slightly graying down, not graying down, but actually putting some shadows under this areas where we have like snow kind of hanging around in places, like on this roof up here. I'm going to touch it with some clear water right here on the bottom, along here. And as I do that, I'm going to then come back and get just a little lavender on my brush and see if I can make it look like there's some snow up there. Got a nice rough edge, leaving some whites, not a lot. Okay. Something similar here. We might have a few spots of snow that are kind of hanging on top of this. There's a break in the wood, actually. There's a lower level and an upper level to this barn. And just gray that off a little bit. Okay. Okay, that's starting to look a little better. This area back here, I got a little spot I missed. Right in here needs to be touched up. Sometimes you get these little whites hanging all over the place and you want to go back and clean them up. So just go in there and go over them. All right. There's a little too bright. All right, in this area here, I want some of my blues. I'm going to get a little bit of this color out of the palette. I don't think I want any more bright reds too much. I may want some for some highlights in the barn, but right now I'm going to see if I can finish off some of this snow in the foreground. And it's going to be some shade of ultramarine blue. Myself a nice little pile of it here on the palette. Take my big brush, get some clean water, and again come in here and wet some of this down so I can start what's called modeling the snow. If I can use the big brush for this, maybe I can. So let's soften the bottom. Okay. So this area over here is getting a light coat of the blue. So these blue marks are really sort of highlighting the snow, showing some dips and whatever in the snow. It's got to be soft. This area here looks a little too hard edge. A little bit like painting clouds in the foreground. Something like that. This very dark, there's an area that's got in front of this area, there's like some frozen water. It has just a little of this green tinge to it here. Let's see if this is dry enough right in here. And it's getting really darker. Get me some of this good dark color here. So I'm making a rough edge. Looks like some frozen water there. And it needs to be just a little less. Something like this. Now on the left side of that, I'm going to go back to my 1/2-inch brush. I'm going to come in here and just sort of put in some edges that make it look like there's some bank of snow that's sort of built up. And if I soften that just right, it will look like it's sort of curved up from the water area, getting lighter. But it's got to be darker here to show that it's really a snowbank. Water, clear water. Okay, that's about this area up here. We want to do the same thing too. It's sort of pulling up this way. Make it look like there's some snow coming up. Slightly soften it a little bit at the bottom. Like that. Maybe a little darker here. I can get some more, get it darker. There, it's starting to show that there's something going on there that's okay. In this area as well, I'm going to get my big old round brush here and see if I can bang in some yellow ochre and some bushes that look like they belong in this area, or at least so I'm taking my round brush here and I'm just sort of using the side of it and pushing in. I've got a mixture of yellow ochre, a little bit of primary yellow, and some burnt sienna. I'm just sort of flicking it in here to show there's some grasses and things like that that are growing out of here. If you use the side of the brush, you can actually get some wonderful effects by just pulling up on the side of the brush. So I've got a lot of that to put in over here. I can continue to do it with this brush. Put some darks at the bottom. But I want to make sure that I've got plenty of that in here. So this all warms the painting up, even though it's a winter scene. Another brush I can use, I'm going to use this 1-inch bristle brush that really gives some of these effects really nicely. It's really designed because the bristles are so strong. They make these nice things flick up like that. Each bristle sort of becomes a little mini paintbrush, if you will. If you get enough paint, get the right consistency of the paint. You can flick these on. something like this, change the color a little bit, get something a little darker. So we're showing a lot of these dead grasses, or at least they're turn the green over here a little bit. So this brush is very wonderful for that kind of thing. If you ever watch any of Sterling Edwards' videos, you'll see him use something like this a lot for this type of thing. Putting some darks at the bottom to give me some depth. And so we're starting to get it to look like there's some foreground, there's some snow, we've got some interesting colors in the foreground, using ochre and using burnt sienna, and a little bit of my dark colors. So this over here sort of needs to connect that. The darker colors underneath help give it some look of 3 dimensions. Okay. How are we doing on time here? We're making pretty good progress, I think. Over here, let's put a couple of things in that look like we've got weeds growing over here, maybe some back there. Make these come up over the barn. Bottom of the barn, it'll help set that barn into the landscape as well a little better. A lot of this brush takes a lot of water and it takes a lot of color. Just constantly keep going back into the paints and getting this side over here. I needed some attention. Okay, now that's not too bad there. All right. So just painting over those things, make it look like we've got some depth in the painting and got a few of these interesting little bushes and grasses, really. Mostly grasses. All right. Now I think it's time to pull out the rigger. Before I do that, I want to come in with my 1/2-inch brush and see if I can do this window back here on the right building just a little bit better. It was too wet a while ago. Something like that, and then just sort of blot it so it doesn't stand out too much. Okay. And with that, thinking if I get my rigger out, I can start putting in some of these fine branches in the trees. I need to have some details there. I'm going to get some still to grain brown, a little burnt sienna, and maybe a little bit of my neutral tint to give me some darks. And I'm going to just come in with this rigger brush and give me a nice full load of paint in that brush, and hopefully it's not going to be too dark. So let's go up here and see. something like that, just a little bit to put it on. In this barn here, I'm going to put in some vertical streaks that look like boards. Change the color. Make some of these look like they're sort of beat up. Here we're going to put in a few cracks, different colors. And you could spend a lot of time going over and just doing things like this. But you get them too bright and they start taking away from the center of interest, so you don't want them to be overdone. You don't want them to be too many of them, and you don't want them to be too dark. So some of these areas that were left, I'm just going to put in a few interesting things over here. I'm going to put maybe a little dark shadow under this guy. A dark shadow there. We could have a shadow, slight shadow under here. Helps highlight that edge of that roof. Probably even have a bit of a shadow along here, maybe one up here. So I'm just kind of hitting places that look like they need a little attention. This barn roof could have some slats coming down like this. Okay, a few here and here. Over here, I think we actually made these go this way. Something like that. You know, it's too dark. So, scumble it up, make it. Okay, I think pretty close here. This needs to have a little bit more definition, this edge of the barn. So I'm just sort of fine-tuning now, doing some detail work, trying to make things look just a little more three-dimensional by putting in some, either some shadows or some highlights on some things. This helps pull that barn, make that corner stand out, because it was almost too light and too near the same value as the one beside it, and that's not good. Taking out some of these whites. Okay. I think that's getting very, very, very close. I may touch it up a little bit in some spots, but pretty much this area in front of the barn needs a little bit of something to tone it down just a little. And that's going to be my little bit of lavender in here. There. Pull that lavender out again, kind of a wet lavender wash. Touch some of this in here so it's not, if it's too bright, your eye will be going over here, and that's not exactly what I want. So I'm going to tone it down and just putting a light wash over it to take away some of that brightness over there. This is a little bit too bright. Tone it down, put a little bit of lavender over it. That's actually too bright too, a little bit, but I think I'm going to leave it. I might put just a few strokes of, Tone it down a little bit maybe. Some white there to get rid of. Okay, that's going to pretty well do it. I think that's a nice painting. It has taken me just about 2 hours to complete this. And so I will be editing it and putting it on YouTube as soon as I can get that done. And our next painting workshop that we will have for watercolor will be on November 28th. So I'll let you see a little bit of the detail here by zooming in, panning across. It actually looks better on the camera than it does up in person, but I think that's the way most videos go. They always seem to look better on camera than they do in up close and personal. So anyway, I think that is about the way I want to leave it, and hopefully this will not be too difficult for some of my students on November 28th. And I want to thank you for watching, and if you get a chance to tune in again or subscribe to my YouTube videos, every time I put a video up, if you subscribe, your email will get a message that I've put a new video up. So take advantage of that, and if you subscribe, you can get alerted when the next video is ready. So until I see you again, nice painting with you, and have a good day.